The summer house had been empty for years, its porch sagging like an old smile. Ivy had made diplomacy with the railing, the steps negotiated daily with gravity, but the wind bell still hung from the eave. A little sun-faded cylinder of metal with a wooden clapper that looked like a teardrop and felt like a seed. When Mira pulled into the gravel drive with a trunk full of paint and the back seat full of bravery, the bell rang once. A tentative greeting. She stood with her keys in her mouth and her hands full of drop claws, and felt the sound climb straight up her spine into the attic of her skull where old summers were stored. Inside, the house smelled of dust and citrus surviving as memory. She threw open the windows, and the bell answered her with a richer note. The sound was the exact color of late afternoon. Bronze with a thin rim of blue. She worked without thinking too hard. Thinking is an enemy of first coats. She washed sills and discovered the small, devoted corpses of moths that had aspired to lamps. She painted one wall of the living room the shade of names you only say to people you trust. Deep, almost green. She ate a peach, leaning over the sink because in houses like this, the sink is where you tell the truth. In the evenings, the wind came in off the lake in its beloved procession, and the bell rehearsed its one song. Mira sat on the steps and let it play against the history in her chest. She remembered her mother standing where she stood now, knuckles of one hand pressing into the small of her back, saying, "Listen. The wind keeps the house awake so it doesn't forget us." She remembered the last summer before the selling, before the loss that was measured in more than money, how the two of them had counted storms instead of reason. On the third day, Mira found a shoebox in a high cupboard labeled Bell. Inside, a folded instruction written in her mother's quick, leaning script. If the bell stops, talk to it. It's shy. Also, don't let the rope fray. The world pulls. Beneath the note lay a handful of small shells and a photograph of the wind bell brand new, shining, ridiculous in its hope. The two of them reflected in its curve like a secret. She restrung the bell with new cord, nodding as she had been taught. Double and then one more for luck. As she tied, the day tightened into evening. The first crickets struck their matchsticks. The wind arrived like a friend who does not knock. The bell rang, not loudly, but certainly, a voice clearing. "Hi, Mom," she said, out loud this time, surprising herself with how orderly the sentence felt. The bell answered with two small notes, lightly braided. The days fell into the kind of pattern that looks like a life when you not watching. Paint, porch, peaches, bell. Morning light tumbled down the hallway, making tidy work of shadows. In the mailbox, a letter from her brother who lived in a city that practiced being impossible. "How is it there?" "Do you hear it?" she wrote back. "Yes, it's the same and different. Like us." On the final night before she had to return to streets that stopped for no one, a storm decided to be large. The air held its breath the way crowds do before the curtain lifts. Mira dragged the porch chairs in and stood in the doorway as Rain wrote essays on the world. The wind bell, who had mastered the art of understatement, rose to the occasion, chiming not frantically, but with conviction. As if the point of sound were not volume but presence. Mira's laugh arrived where her tears had been living. She felt the odd, exquisite piece of belonging to something that does not ask her to be more than she is. When the storm passed, the porch smelled like its own childhood. The bell gave one last note, a period at the end of a long sentence that did not need editing. She slept with the windows open. In the night, when the bell chimed and then went quiet and then chimed again, she learned the new grammar of her grief, that love is wind and houses and the small instruments we leave behind to translate weather into memory. In the morning, she left a note inside the shoebox. Her handwriting, a cousin of her mother's now, restrung, repainted, still listening. She locked the door, pocketed the key, and promised the porch she would try to come back before the paint turned the color of stories. At the end of the drive, the bell let go of one last sound that followed her farther than physics say it should. She did not look back. Not because she was strong, but because the sound had climbed into the passenger seat and was humming harmony. Closing quote. The wind carries the sounds, but the memories stay.